has what you call the red eye, so it's very slow. Oh, get your purse. You know we women can't go. Oh, where are you, Lucia?
I don't even know where it is.
Oh, I gotta go. I have relatives here. And believe it or not, they don't come to California to see me. And it's pretty sad. Not much, anyway. We have a lot of good time. Oh, I wanted to have my... If you all haven't met Frances, she's been putting me up or putting up with me. I'm not too sure what for a couple of days. And all we've done is a party. So you know how much trouble I'm in. I was counting the pages in the book. Don't start recording yet. Don't record yet. We'll find out in a minute. I was counting the pages in the book that we're buying, aren't we, for the lectureship, and realized that I'm about 17 pages. Our next speaker has 12 pages. The last speaker has 20. I'm in trouble. I don't know what this last speaker is going to do, but if you stick to your notes, you're in deep trouble. So, I mean, you know, we're very timely in our subject. Went up to Barnes & Noble and looked for a book that was being talked about at the hospital because it's written by 2 doctors. Not Christian, not recommended for your Christian list. Oprah recommends this, Oprah Winfrey, so that's enough to scare you. Oprah wants you to know this. In 30 minutes after the show, this book was sold out at our local Barnes & Noble. And I think it's important for you to realize that people do want to know more about ourselves and where we come from. They want to know how to take care of our bodies. And with that kind of a thought, I thought it was interesting. These 2 doctors who are very well-known specialists in New York, and you can open up the jacket of this book like I do and see what they said, because this kind of gives you an idea. What are they thinking? While it's true that we live in an age where we're obsessed with our bodies, as we are with celebrities' hairstyles, the reality, Dolly Parton and I have one thing in common, blonde hair. While it's true that we live in an age, yes, the reality is that most of us know very little about what chugs, churns, and thumps throughout this miraculous, scientific, and artistic system of anatomy. With that kind of a thought, I like the first part. We don't know much about this miraculous body, more or less, that it's very scientific, that we're trying to figure out, and that it actually is something that we know is very artistic. So we'll start with art. Here we go. Now we're going to see if it works. This is always scary for me when I start these things. Woo-hoo, here we go. Yeah. Here we go. Oh, artistic. Now, Michelangelo, you got to say his name right. You know, if you've been to Italy, you know it's not Michelangelo. Michelangelo, he depicted what he thought would be like God creating Adam. It's okay. The fingertips are all what most people show, but we like anatomy. So this is the beginning. And this is a really interesting thing that Michelangelo, at least in the Sistine Chapel, how many have been there? How many have seen this? Yeah, it's beautiful. And let's appreciate the beauty of the artistic part of our body. See if we can make this work. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So where did life start? This is where we got to start. What's this thing all about? It's not just our body. What makes us function? What makes us a living creature? You know, I never had that question answered. I had, you know, my high school biology, chemistry, went on to USC and didn't teach as much. I knew a lot about evolution. Then I went on to Abilene Christian, and it was there that an instructor of mine, who I later married, made it true that we can answer where life came from in a scientific way by believing the Bible. And he said, in the beginning, that's where life came. In the beginning, God created. And it's a much better explanation of life and all of our origins than is what we're being taught in evolutionary. You were right. Doug went to Pepperdine, and he was head of the department at Abilene Christian. And he married me and demoted himself. He was not head of the Department of Natural Sciences at Pepperdine. There was no biology department. Anyway, he came there and he was fighting theistic evolution within the Church of Christ. And it's pretty prevalent. And he was unique. And he was well accepted in other denominations speaking. Church of Christ was a tough time for him. And of course, he was well accepted down here in Texas and talked a lot about textbooks and things like that to say, we got to get evolution out of the textbooks. And he fought that 40 years ago. When I first married him in 1962, he was hot on the trail. And he spoke many times before state boards of education on the fact that evolution is not scientific. Won't go into that any further, but just know that he taught me faith in the Word of God and that I could forget some of the things I'd been taught at USC. I did finish my degree at USC, so I'm a Trojan. Okay, well, Longhorns. And also then I went, woohoo, back there. Then I also went to UCLA, so I'm a Bruin. So I don't know who I am. Then I have a little Wildcat in me from Abilene. So I'm a Trojan Bruin Wildcat. Anyway, so there I was working on this idea. What is real? Is it creationism or evolution? And of course, after hearing Doug lecture, and I had to pass his test, so I had to learn creation in our biology classes at Abilene Christian. It's really interesting when you think about it. People don't want to believe this. See these two guys up there theorizing? Well, I think there should be one more explicit step here. In step 2, then a miracle occurs. I believe then a miracle occurs. Here's we're gonna give this probably one more. I'm real good at PowerPoint. Is that where I want to go? Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, in our whole body are little tiny, tiny, almost invisible drops of protoplasm. I always say you're made up of good protoplasm. Especially if you've got big ears, you're going to live a long time. You ever heard me say that? So look at the babies in the nursery. Ears barely grow any once we hit maturity, and maybe sign of longevity, so it's kind of fun. But the cells that make up our body, tiny, tiny little drop, where there lays the seed of life. It has the power then to distribute life to every other existing creature that it starts with. Life is not being originated today. All life today comes from pre-existing life. We do not make life in the laboratory. God created life. What we have now is the law of biogenesis. It's there. We can't really create it. They're playing games when they tell you there's a chance of creation of life. They're playing with matter that's God created. The uniqueness of human life is something very much God-given. Our human being is a divine gift that is present in our DNA makeup and differs from any other animal species. We're not going to go, I hope, into too much scientific. I've cut my speech down by half. So isn't it really awesome to know, though, that we're made up of a little pile of dirt? We're 75% water. Our brain's 80% water. Just fluid. Try to keep something up there. So our brain's 80% water, and then we're a little bit of air mixed in with that. And there's not much there except for that spark called life. There's no explanation other than life with its spiritual attributes comes from not dead matter, but from a spiritual source. We believe that life and spirit are in God, and there's no other power source out there. There's no power source that makes the DNA come alive. It's an amazing thing. You just can't take DNA and wake up life. It just doesn't happen. The Creator breathed into Adam, we know, the very first breath of life. Adam, the progenitor of all mankind, possessed an awesome and it's such a complex structure. And of course, we talk about the brain. It's a little different from most animals, as most of you know. It isn't a matter of size. Some pea-sized brains are pretty good. Some large brains aren't so good. But it's that human brain that was purposely prepared for and destined to receive the spark of the divine intelligence, which we call a soul. Now you look at that and you don't have any idea where the soul is, neither do I. But it's interesting because at least we try to probe it, we play with it, we see the brain, we feel it. It feels like a hard-boiled egg. How many felt a brain? Oh, good, there's heroes. How many put a probe in a brain? I watched them do it. I've never probed. But it's interesting. How could this thing have a soul? Where's the soul? Well, we know something's different about us any way you look at it. We know all these various areas of the brain have to do with our muscles, have to do with our being able to think, concentrate, be creative. We can even think of things that haven't really been created. That's the God thing. We're very creative. We have the ability to speak. We have the ability to interpret things. And what we don't have, though, sometimes is the use of the brain like we'd like to. We sometimes let it go. Here's some more sensory areas involved and the way we can feel, touch, understand. You have a stroke on the left side of the brain. What happens? Usually lose your speech, and your ability to do things. Your right side goes out. So we have an interesting thing here where people hit the back of their head and see stars, occipital lobe where the visual area is. And of course, my problem in old age is the cerebellum. maybe the cerebrum. The cerebellum is the thing that keeps you balanced. How many have a little trouble when you go down a stair or up a stair? And we have a little trouble with these things as we get a little bit older. But these are the major portions of the brain, and it's just very, very interesting to take a look and say, well, we could talk all day about that, and we're not going to. Okay, so all we need to know is so complex. The human brain, purposely prepared by God for that spark of that supreme intelligence. You know, I know that you've been told this in your classes somewhere in science, if you've been in high school, that we use about 10% of our brain cells. We don't know much about brain cells in general. In fact, we're learning more every day. We are just realizing that some of the cells that we thought were just laying around not doing anything. First, this is a little nerve cell, one little blob of protoplasm, as all cells are a blob, with a little nucleus and the membranes. And does that look like something that's alive? It's very much alive. It moves, it has metabolism, it has all the characteristics of life. Don't know what life is, but we describe its characteristics. Surrounding the end here, this is the dendrite end, these little fingers that go out, accept the impulses coming down to it and sending it out by way of the axon. Those little cells called neuroglial cells, we thought they were nothing but support cells. Now what we're finding out is that these little neuroglial cells, according to, here's a Trojan thing again, Dr. Chin King Ko, whatever. Anyways, Dr. Ko. He's a professor of biological sciences and a neuroscientist at USC. And he just in this last summer published and said, these little cells probably are the key to the fact that when we injure our brain or a nerve, like I have a nerve cut in my knee, I have a new knee, that how do those nerves come back and know where to go? And what he said was, these little glial cells or support cells are a lot more than we thought. What they are critical junctures between the neuron to neuron connection. Those little bitty teensy-weensy cells that we thought, millions of them, were nothing there but structural support cells. Our cells now that we call the cells that make a connection and maintain it. He says normally that after a neuron makes connection, say where it's going like to a muscle, it just sits there and stops growing. But if some damage occurs, like on my knee, it grows back to the same spot. Why? And he said, I know why. Those glial cells act as parents. They actually nurture young neurons to get them where they're going. Then they step back till they grow, as they grow up. Then they get damaged, and these little glial cells step up just like a parent should, and they come in and help out and guide these dendrites and neurons back to where they belong. How weird is that? So the brain's full of cells. Somehow we may use, what do we know what we use? God uses them. We don't know quite how they use, but probably we could do a lot more in increasing our intelligence and our ability. You know, you all who are a little over 50 ought to at least be playing chess once a week or bridge. Are you? Are you studying? Are you challenging your brain? You're still reading Psalms 23. I know, you have to go beyond. Keep challenging your brain. They say every time you open the Bible, you learn something new. And if you don't, you're not challenging your brain. That's how you make those little gray matter neurons really work. Anyway, another field that I learned, Doug taught me this too, is a thing called histology. And if you ever looked under a microscope, sometimes you can't focus the first time. And I couldn't see a thing the first few days. Something wrong with my microscope. I couldn't see anything. Finally, I got so I could identify cells. I could identify tissues. Went on to medical school and could figure out what the cells were doing. It's called the physiology or histophysiology. And then I learned a little more about histopathology and how all these little cells that are interconnected actually work when they're damaged or don't work. The thing about histology is, do you know what the word histo really means? Histo is the Greek for a net or a tissue, and it means it's going to form like a loom or a web. And you can kind of see that in these connective tissues. By the way, collagen tissues are the things that get in trouble when you have rheumatoid arthritis, or maybe some of you have fibromyalgia. We don't want to talk about that. Okay. And here we go. This then is loose connective tissue. Doesn't it look like it could be a loom or a web of tissue? It is, and this is what they're saying. Now, under the electron microscopy, which this is, you can see that we're learning more and more about how tissues connect up. All the tissues of the 11 main organ systems of the body. Your skin is an obvious connective tissue, all the stuff that holds it together, all the way to the brain, to the heart, the cardiovascular system, to the endocrine system. All of these 11 systems are held together like a loom. They're held together like they're knit together. We are knit together. Isn't that an interesting comment? We're knit together. And my husband taught me that. The woven tapestry of our system then is that each cell, though, then reproduces as an adult cell its tissue. When that tissue is damaged, it reproduces after itself. These are adult, not stem cells. That's a whole other subject that we could talk about for about an hour. We won't do that. We may touch it. I think it's really interesting if you want to open your Bibles, but you know this. This is, if you don't know this, I'm talking to the wrong people. Psalms 139, 13 through 16 is my key for the day. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am so fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you and made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed bodies. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That was the NIV version. Not sure which version you use, but it's really interesting when you think about what we are and what God knows. And this is, anybody in here taking embryology? Because you can come out and help me. Embryology, anybody? Oh, one person. Must be a nurse in the back here. Okay. This is an embryo at 4 weeks. This is a very delicate time, isn't it? The first trimester. Well, the Creator knows very well that when we're looking like that, even before we look like that, He knows all about us. It's kind of a thought that some people are scared. There's somebody out there who knows me before I was, as I am today, and where I'm headed in the future. That's God, and He's made us and purposed us and designed us to be the dwelling place for His Holy Spirit. Is the Holy Spirit in this little person? You better say yes. Because of His involvement, though, we got to also realize that those things He gave us we need to use properly and not be poor stewards of our body. And we could get into a lecture on hygiene. Exercise. Hard to do, isn't it? I hope you have a buddy that walks with you every morning. I hope you exercise. I hope you eat well. And that means probably, although we can eat meat, it's okay. Keep it to 3 or 4 ounces a day. Sometimes in spite of ourselves, in spite of what we do or don't do, we actually have a body that just keeps plugging along. It's an amazing thing. It has a lot of flexibility as to what we can do. We can survive and even reproduce. But you know what? Our offspring can have distorted systems because of what we do with abuse or neglect, even to the 3rd or 4th generation. And you know that scripture in Deuteronomy 5:9. Most physicians, particularly obstetricians and us family doctors, I'm a family doctor, by the way, retired. I'm the best kind of doctor. But I do come at you and preach a little bit. Don't do what I say. Do as I say, don't as I do. The human embryo at 6 weeks is a very delicate thing, and there's nothing we want to do to disturb this baby in its first trimester of pregnancy. This is a really interesting thing, especially if you've seen one. Did any of you ever miscarry and see this baby? Yeah, I've seen this baby. Not myself, but I saw my daughters a couple of years ago. It's kind of shocking. And she went through what I call labor to get rid of a very seriously problem, I guess. We don't know what happened. But anyway, biochemistry that we as parents have go into something to get that egg and sperm going. So even people who are deciding to have a baby should start taking care of themselves before they conceive. They should, we know cigarette smoking's out, even in Texas. And, we don't drink alcohol, but, we're caffeine addicts. You don't really need to overstimulate your nervous system any more than necessary. Take care of yourself and don't overindulge in anything. Hard, isn't it? But we need to know that it's very important that those cells that are being developed with all their chromosomal makeup of that child are being affected. And we know they're a little resistant. You're not going to go get an x-ray at the time you're in this state, are you? Because you might cause chromosomal damage. Probably not. I deal a little bit in the thing that you're going to crack up. It's called magnetic therapy, but it works for some people to relieve pain. And they say in the first trimester, don't wear any of the magnets. It's not that they do any harm, but they're afraid that some lawyer is going to come get them and say, you caused the damage for that baby in its first trimester. You can't do anything, You can't hardly breathe, especially in California. I don't know. Well, anyway, so what happens here? Where does life really come from? And this is in the paper this morning. For about $10 million now, you can find out about your genes and what's wrong with them. In a couple more years, $10,000, you can find out what genes got a problem. And then they say it'll get down to $1,000 and you have your whole genome. I think that's interesting. That's okay. It's still not life. It's just a blueprint. I just wouldn't want to be the lab tech who pulls out the gene that's got diabetes. Think about it. They're learning so much. So it's in the morning newspaper. Did you all read the paper this morning? I don't even know where I put the paper. There it is. So y'all look it up and you get your personal genetic records. That's a big goal for the people at Harvard. They need to make a lot of money. They want research money. Anyway, this morning in the Star Telegram. All right, so you can check on that and see if you want to get your genome in a couple of years. You want to spend $10 million, you can get it now. Okay, but anyway, we want to take good care of ourselves, and we're not going to get into the DNA and the chromosomes yet. Let's go on a little bit further. Here's another embryo. It's at 8 weeks. So when did the life begin? Do you think life was there? When was it? In the beginning. Where did it come from? It's the power. It's that idea that life can't be just brought up from nowhere. This is transmitted from cell to cell. And the gametes, or the sex cells, actually passes on. The egg and the sperm form the zygote into a living and developing tissue. And then it finally becomes this little embryo. Then by 8 weeks, this little embryo, maybe you can tell, has some body parts. And this is one of the ones that tickles me, because when you see these embryos, and I was in when my daughter had her first ultrasound, and I started saying, oh, look, there's a spinal cord. Look what you can see. And the tech was looking at me like, who is she? Oh, it's all right. I saw my own breast cancer, and they missed it. I didn't want to believe it. So anyway, here we go. There's a lot of things you can see in these ultrasounds. And one of the things you can actually see are the bones. And I could see the spinal cord. I can see the spinal column, I mean. So people look at that up to this point, and it's developing. They can see it's developing. But what do? They don't believe it's important. It's not a person. You can go ahead and have a hardening of your heart. In Ecclesiastes 11:5, it says, not knowing about the development of the baby, it says the bones are growing in the womb. And because of not understanding the works of God, they want to ignore the fact this is a growing miracle. Anybody with a stony heart can run out and get an abortion, and there are a lot of doctors who'll do it. It's called money. You'll do it for money. And I hope in Texas there's enough Christian doctors that we're not having that. I know in medical school, when I had to do my first just removal of a partially missed abortion, it was terribly hard to go in there and scrape out what was left of even a baby at that point. You know, we don't want to think about that. We really don't, because we don't want to have a closed mind that doesn't say that that's a person. That's a person that you're looking at. Why deny the miracle of that creation, the birth of that child? That's called resisting the spirit of understanding. Now this is mislabeled. Anybody know why? It's not an embryo. That's a fetus. Biology 101, or embryology 101. That's a fetus by now. At 4 months, you can see the fingers and the toes, and you can actually tell if it's a boy or a girl, if you get the right angle on the ultrasound. So this one is an actual fetus. This looks, now can you imagine there are times that they can go in and grab these babies if they're, in trouble. They've even done surgery on babies like this. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? By 7 months, they definitely can go in and do some surgical repairs if they have to, like a spina bifida and things like that. There's the miracle. Let's talk just a tiny bit about us. Are we miraculous? Are we phenomenal? A woman has a special place in creation. Not only our anatomy and a physiology that lets us have babies, but that's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. Now, my daughter-in-law hasn't been able to conceive, and she has to conceive because she has cramps all the time. Her mother told her, okay, as soon as you have a baby, the cramps will go away. I think it's convinced her something. So they've done something rather interesting that I'm going to tell you a little bit about in a minute. But anyway, she will be able to conceive. Anyway, this is how many know all these things? Oh, they told me I had a little poker thing here. I can, there it goes. This is your ovary. It's about the size of the end of your thumb. The uterus is about that big, about 2 to 3 inches across, tiny. Up here is the cervix that people know that's the thing you get in trouble with, viral infections, and get early cervical cancer when you're young. Don't do that. Anyway, so here's how it goes. The sperm cell has to go up, and it actually meets, as you know, the egg in the fallopian tube. In the meantime, let's see if I'm at where I am in my speech here. when the little egg is released, let's see if I can get a released egg here somewhere. I went on to another subject. Let's see if I can back up. Anyway, when the little egg is too far. When the egg is released, it's actually caught by little fingers at the end of the ovarian or oviduct, the little tube that came out. Isn't it amazing? I mean, if you could see this under a microscope, how this little, going endoscopically and take pictures, these little fingers reach out and grab that ovum, that egg, and make it go down the tube. And those little hairs and little cilia are moving one direction, bringing the sperm in another direction. How does that happen? Cilia go one way, they go the other way, and they get them together. They actually join the sperm and the egg, usually in the fallopian tube, we hope. Not outside the tube, because that makes an ectopic. Some babies grow out there in the actual lining, and it's really interesting. Babies can grow right here. Figure that out. But usually they're supposed to be growing and attaching to the endometrium. So if you're on schedule, about every 28 days, we drop an egg. And so we have to do that by, our glands actually have a lot to do with this right now. And you probably know most of the glands. And some of the glands aren't even listed. They even thought the thymus was a vestigial organ of evolution. They think the pineal was a vestigial organ. They thought the pituitary was even a vestigial organ. People back in the days of Darwin didn't know anything about any of this. And we're still, how little we know. Up in the top of the head, where the pituitary is, there's also a gland behind that that's called the pineal. And that's the one we're still wondering, what does it do? We have some theories. It has something to do. It goes away around the time of puberty. Just as the thymus tends to go away somewhere around the time of puberty and kind of lay there dormant and do strange things, so does the pineal. So we got to still have a lot to learn on that one. But anyway, let's see what else we can do here. This is the gland they call the master gland. And of course, not terribly master, God's the master. But it is interesting that we have an anterior pituitary, which is the front part of this little pea-shaped thing, and we have a posterior pituitary. And behind it, all these nerves come funneling into the posterior back end of the pituitary. And that happens to be full of nerve fiber. All the major nerves of the entire brain come down through the hypothalamus down into the posterior pituitary. Don't think about it. Doctors don't think much about it. Research doesn't think much about it. They think it may put out a little oxytocin, a little chemical that helps you have contractions of your uterus. It's all full of nervous tissue. Interesting, isn't it? Because smack dab plastered on the front of it is the anterior pituitary, or the front, which is all endocrine, the thing that's called the master gland. It puts out tremendous signals to all the glands of the body to do what they're supposed to do. That's part of what it does. We're still trying to figure out what it really does. Don't think your doctor knows. My professor, who was head of all the thyroid research in the United States, told me, I don't know a thing about what the thyroid does. You think your doctor knows how to put you on Synthroid? They don't know what they're doing. They still don't know what they're doing. It's just it's a game. It's an art. Medicine is an art. I think we should tell the people who are trying to socialize us, this is tough stuff when you're trying to tell us what to do. We're an art. And that's an art. We don't even know for sure how all the things that the anterior, more or less the posterior pituitary really do. But we know that somehow that posterior pituitary has an influence, not only on the endocrine output as it sends stimuli through that gland to put out hormones, but it also sends back up the stalks into the brain, things to do. You can overstimulate your brain, and we think it has a lot to do with that posterior pituitary receiving all these stimuli from your brain. It goes both directions. It's a give and take type of thing. But anyway, what we're talking about right now is it puts out a little endocrine, or a little substance called FSH, or the follicle stimulating hormone. And of course, that's really interesting. Let's see, do I have another, I don't think I have a picture at this point that covers this, but if you pop this little egg out, you know what happens? Have you ever, felt it? Metal schmerz? Yeah, young people, yeah. Well, what happens at that point if you're not fertilizing that egg? That forms this little scar. In about 8 days, there's a scar. And that little corpus albicans, or fibrosa, is the only scar in the body that will dissolve within that month. You got a scar? You're going to get rid of it. Don't you wish that happened every time you got a scar in a month? It'd be gone. Plastic surgeons would love it. How does this happen? Nobody knows. But isn't it interesting then that every month we dissolve a scar? Where are we on time? Oh boy. Okay. So let's see if we can go up. And that actually describes a little bit more if you would like charts. At least it's big. Things I get in medical school or in my continuing medical education you can't read. But here comes FSH down to make the ovaries do what they're going to do to put out an egg, follicle stimulating hormone. And of course, when you get pregnant, it does all kinds of other things as our breasts develop. You can tell you're pregnant as soon as your breasts get tender, right? You know something's happening right now. So again, this is the whole idea of why we're phenomenally made, so that we can have these eggs and sperm get together to continue the life form of humankind. Now, when that little, let's see if we have a picture of that. Let's see, I've forgotten kind of how we do that. Oh, there comes the little egg or oocyte popping out. And that if it doesn't get fertilized, that's where the little scar tissue will be. And the little egg goes, it's gone, just dissolves. Who are they? Here come the sperm. What are they going to do? Well, this is an interesting thing, because at this point, that little egg, when it's there trying to think about what it's going to get pregnant, we're early in early stages here, puts out a whole bunch of funny little stuff around it called cumulus oophorus to make it hard for those guys to get in. So what happens when they get up there? Those sperm have to produce another enzyme to break through the cumulus oophorus. Then they have to make another enzyme to get through the harder shell of the egg. And at that point, as soon as one of the little sperm get into the egg, what happens? The egg has to put out an enzyme to make the eggshell hard, so hopefully not another one gets in, or you're going to have twins. So what happens at this point? We have all these enzymes and things going on, and these cute little guys are finally going to make us pregnant. Well, at this point, we have something that's really, really great. And here we go into the chromosomes. This is the start of a person. The entire blueprint or pattern of DNA from the egg and the sperm with its God-given life force. There's no life force in DNA. DNA is only a blueprint. It's not alive, not really. The cells are alive because they have the God-given life in them. There we go, there goes the little zygote gets together, and here we're going to have 46 chromosomes. And these chromosomes are what determine whether we are a boy or girl. And some of you've known about this, the X and the Y chromosome. If you're a girl, you're a double X. If you're a triple X, you're really in trouble. Seriously, it causes some interesting bad things for the offspring if they happen to be a triple X. And I've seen it happen. So in the meantime, this is then one of the chromosomal patterns of a human being. 23 pairs, 46 chromosomes, it's a human being. And as Mel Gibson said, without 46 chromosomes being alive, you can't even play with the idea of stem cells. This is a person's whole self. This is alive. Because God put the life in there, not because DNA itself can do its own thing completely. There's something really unusual that God has given a power to life. So at this point, if we want to, let's back up again one more time. I just wanted to say that since this is in the newspaper this morning, that chromosomes form the DNA of a person. Those chromosomes are just massive, massive strands of DNA. It's called the double helix of life as it comes down here. And all these many, many genes are in there. And that is just an amino acid polymerase cycle, a perfect pattern that now they're starting to at least look at it. Not that they understand, but a beautiful pattern called now they can pick out and call it the genome and know more about what's going on in our development. Doesn't make it wrong. You can accept that. They're going to know a lot about you, and you're going to pay and find out if you've got diabetes in the family or something dreadful, or cancer. That's something we got to worry about if you can have an insurance policy. You know, how are you going to get it if they know that in your little genes you've got the tendency for diabetes? Of course, most of us just provoke it by overeating. It's called gluttony. That's adult diabetes. That isn't the kind we're talking about diabetes of the type that is juvenile, or it has several different names now. But, you know, we got to take care of our bodies, even if we know in our genetic pattern we have a tendency for something. It's just the life insurance companies who aren't going to like that. Anyway, it's interesting to know that in about 4 or 5 days, the embryonic development happens. So in 4 or 5 days after fertilization, here we come. Here's the zygote, the two getting together, and you have meiosis and all this mitosis and all these things going on to split this into 2-cell, 4-cell, 8-cell. How many know about the program This is for snowflake babies, adoption. Snowflakes? Have you heard of snowflakes? Oh, you guys aren't listening to other people beyond us. Church of Christ doesn't maybe recognize Dobson? Dobson's one of the big ones for life and family. Great guy, great advocate for all of us. At this point, you can get people who are pro-life have got these, whoops, I pushed it too soon. Have got these little cells that are frozen, and they're up for adoption. And my son and his wife Beth, that we just mentioned earlier, have adopted 5 babies, 5 people. Out of the first 3 that were implanted in my sweet daughter-in-law, this one probably is the one that took 8 cells. That's a person. She's 4 months pregnant now, and you can see that we're going to find out it's a boy or a girl next week. Ooh. Somebody else's egg and sperm, not theirs. Frozen in time. Phenomenal, just phenomenal. You know, we almost know too much, don't we? I don't know if we're wise enough to handle, like stem cell research. We're not very good at this, especially if we're not Christians. We'll talk about that a little bit. But at 8 cells, then we double up again. And this little funny little 8-cell stage gets bigger, and it's called the morula. And then it gets bigger, and it becomes a blastocyst. And here we have the beginning of the inner cell mass of a baby, a person. And along the side, we have the beginning of what will be implantation and the beginning of the placenta. This is an interesting, complex organ. How many of you got to see your afterbirth? Did you get to see your placenta when you had your babies? Oh, have you ever seen a placenta? Oh, what an organ. Big things, bigger than my hand like this, just full of blood. Will that ever bleed out when that baby comes out? Shouldn't. Fantastic miracle the way God made us. It'll never bleed out. But when it's in there and it's implanted along the side, as this is in the anterior part of the uterus, that placenta won't allow coagulation. But at birth, it stops. It won't bleed out. It's just amazing. Just boom, instantaneously it clots off. And so here we come, the baby. Now, some of you may have had placenta previa, where this little placenta just implants a little too close down here to the cervix. And then you may have trouble with bleeding, and you may be put to bed. You may lose your baby. So a lot of things can happen if the placenta doesn't properly implant. That looks familiar. Some of you have seen that. Yeah. So in 4 or 5 days, the little ball of the morula become then the blastocyst, and by the end of the 6th day, it starts producing a hormone that's the one we detect pregnancy. It's called the human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. HCG, for all you young people, know what that is. Now we're detecting pregnancy actually by then, day 8. Let's see if we have one other thing here, the placenta. So we're pregnant, and here's the baby implanting. What a fantastic organ this one is. It's a network of protoplasmic strands that are just filled with fluid, and they go in there to these spaces, it'll actually erode into the mother's maternal bloodstream. The embryo plugs itself into the mother's blood, receives its nutrients and oxygen to grow, and then the arterial blood from the mother starts forming around it to form more of the embryo's bloodstream. What a perfect example of what we call the interwoven design or fabric. Under the microscope, David described this under the microscope thing. How do you do that? What fantastic tissue this is as we're being knit together, literally between mother and child. As the mother's arteries are actually cut open to get the bloodstream going from the embryo over to the baby, this literally cuts off the mother's bloodstream. They call it truncation. And the mother's arteries are cut open, and little finger-like villi from the placental side grow in there and take a hold. It's just a miracle. It's just a miracle. Here, all the gases are exchanged, all the water passively goes from mom to baby, and of course, other things like drugs and alcohol go from mom to baby. Special bound protein, iron, comes in there transferring, and then that is what keeps the baby going, gets the blood going. Who's asleep? I see you back there. My daughter said I was going to put you to sleep. Okay, try not. Wake up. Okay, this is just, so here we are, placenta at week 7. By the 17th day, the entire placenta, 17th day, just a little over 2 weeks. How long? 2 weeks, zoop. And there we are. We've now got the placenta working and formed at 17 days. And by the end of the 3rd month, we'd said we are no longer just a little embryo. We are now a fetus. And by the 4th month, we know we're male or female. In the 7th month, we have a viable baby. Isn't that a phenomenal thing? I wish you could have seen what that placenta looks like. It is really, really neat. When that afterbirth comes down, it hurts, doesn't it? You know, if you're awake during this period, it's like a birth. Most women now have cesarean sections down here, they tell me. No, oh well, all right. So anyway, the mother then has this wonderful full-term fetus. Do you know how much blood then is being pumped back and forth? See if we can go back to that one. Oh, the full-term fetus. How much blood per minute is pumped from the mother through that placenta? A pint a minute. That's a unit of blood a minute. It goes right through into the baby and out. In, out. Yeah. You heard the placenta souffle? You heard it? Anybody? It's a fabulous thing. Hear the placenta souffle, pumping. A pint of blood a minute in through the baby. Isn't it exciting? That umbilical cord alone, it's the funniest feeling thing, and it's got all this gelatinous stuff around it. It's called Wharton's jelly, and it keeps that umbilical lifeline from kinking up, hopefully. Sometimes it wraps around necks, and it does things that we wished it wouldn't. But basically, God has put it into a protective coating called Wharton's jelly, and it will resist kinking anyway. You know, Genesis 3:16, we kind of know, don't we, that in pain you will bring forth children. That forceful uterine contraction is really phenomenal. In 15 minutes, it'll be all over. The baby comes down through that birth canal, and you know what happens? Your back hurt? It hurts. It really starts to hurt because everything's loosening up back there on those sacroiliac joints and down the pubic bone. Everything's loosening up. All of the muscles are ready to relax coming down from the coccyx. By the way, it's called a tailbone. That's evolution, you guys. Wrong term. Coccyx. You don't have a tail. Okay, that's not true. That's a bunch of baloney. All right, so there's the coccyx with all the muscles that are attached to it. Some of us who have bladder falling know about muscles and things not filling quite the way they should. They're too relaxed as we get older. But this lets the baby come down through that very tiny canal, the birth canal. Isn't it exciting then at this point, as the baby comes out and that placenta detaches and we cut the cord, that baby's blood is now changed directions and is filling every organ of the baby's body. It's phenomenal. Also, another little enzyme comes out that actually opens up the lungs called surfactant. And if the baby is born at 7 or 8 months or so, and some of us know about this, you have a baby whose lungs aren't mature enough to open up. And then we have to treat it in the NICU. And that's a toughie. It's even tougher when they're littler. Anybody ever been in neonatal, the intensive care unit, and seen the little tiny premature babies that look like cucumbers? Wow, you know, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal what we can do in medicine today. We can save those lives, but we kill other ones by doing abortions. Anyway, all the tissues now have start to function immediately at birth. You don't have to pound the baby's back. It'll happen. It'll ah! And when you do that, and it starts breathing really, really well, just realize that every organ that's there is not a leftover organ. God has purposed every tissue to have its purpose. It's not just something that's stuck in there like they thought the thymus was for a long time, or the pineal, or some other. You know, we used to take out incidental appendectomies at the time, anytime you opened the abdominal cavity. No, that's a very important immune system for your entire abdominal cavity. It's full of lymph tissue. My dad used to say, you don't remove stuff unless it's doing you bad stuff. You know, you don't take things out that are working. Tonsils, I never had a tonsillectomy. I had these huge tonsils, and the school nurse would come up to me and say, your dad's a doctor? And you haven't had your tonsils out? I went through UCLA medical school, and in 1958, I had never seen a tonsillectomy because they stopped doing them, because it's such an important part of our immune system. At that time, and I've never heard them talk about it, but I wonder, they said if you have a tonsillectomy, you have a much greater chance, if you've got cancer, to have metastatic cancer. It's such an important part of our immune system. So I hope most of you still have your tonsils and your adenoids. But isn't it interesting? Every organ has a proper place in our life here. Well, let's look at something else here. See if we can go a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. There we are. That's my granddaughter. Just came out, just breathing. Everything's functioning. That was in, you know, right there in the delivery room, down in the hospital near her home in Seattle. And it was really an exciting time. And her husband's there to catch the baby with the doctor. I have a picture of Jimmy. I didn't bring that. Just Caitlin Rose, but isn't she cute? This is now called the neonatal period, and it's a little exciting when the mother's trying to breastfeed and this baby's going, meow, and everything, oh, my. But anyway, the neonatal it means here's a person that's born with its own unique identity. It's all there for God's pleasure. One of Doug's favorite verses, and you have to read the King James Version for this, is Revelations 4:11, and it's on his marker for his grave. And that's where we are here only for God's pleasure. He created us for his pleasure. We're not here for our pleasure. You're not here to hear me. You're here hopefully to hear and see a little more about what God's all about, the miracle of creation. We're here for God, for his pleasure. Well, this is about as risque as I can get next to Michelangelo. I need something. We are so wonderfully made, but I didn't give you any really graphic designs. But man and woman, aren't we different? Aren't we something special beyond childbearing? Woman's part of God's master plan. In the scriptures, we know we're created to be a helpmate. But beyond that, is that all there is to it? We're the grand finale of creation. We're it. We're the greatest thing that he created. So what happens? Why did he put us here and have us here? Well, we're here for a lot of things. We can enjoy the love of man. We can enjoy the beauty of this earth, especially this morning. It's going to rain tonight. But most importantly, to love our Creator and communicate with our Creator, Father. So we have been created with a special kind of love. We're here and God uses us for his glory. Our body was created to have the Holy Spirit reside in it, as you well know in 2 Corinthians 6:16. God has put a huge value on us. No matter what we look like, we are a very valuable piece of his real estate. We are debtors to our Creator. He's bought us. His Son, Jesus Christ, has paid a price for us that we are now the perfect temple as Christian women. They say God created man before woman because there's always a rough draft before the masterpiece. I don't know, but it's fun. And I say, vive la différence. And my son and daughter do not take French. Vive la différence. Thank goodness, may long live the difference. That particular French saying is not very well looked at in modern society. And I'm not too sure they want to believe the truth in that anymore. Actually, we're trying to blur the differences between male and female, right? Something's going wrong. It's kind of a sick, competitive type society. Be more like a man. When I went to medical school, there was hardly any women in medical school when I entered. In 1957, when I applied, they said to me, you really want to be a doctor? How are you going to be a mother? What are you going to do? All the questions you can't ask anymore. How are you going to do that? One thing my brother challenged me, you're going to love this one, Sonny. He said, Luke, when you go to medical school, you got to come out looking like a woman. And don't be competitive with a man. You are not a man. Imagine that. My own brother said, you're not a man. Well, he tried enough putting me in hammerlocks when I was a kid. And he was tough. He's a tough brother. He tried to make me into a boy. But he had a lot of good friends in the neighborhood, so I survived. I worry a little more in our adult years if I've survived. But you know what? We're different. And we're here for a real definite purpose beyond just being here to have children. You'd think some people, the way they act, are barnyard morality, that they're only here to have fun and have children and just do what they want to do. We're sad about that. But anyway, the most exciting thing is how different we really are. And as we grow older, things happen to our endocrine system. Do not take hormone replacement therapy unless your doctor really talks to you. I took it. I knew better. You don't take Premarin, pregnant mare urine, right? You don't take that. It's a toxic waste. But I thought it was going to help my brain and my heart. It's totally been disproved. 5 years into Premarin and Provera, I've got my breast cancer. I knew better. Why do we do things we know better? Well, I thought I was going to be able to keep the brain and the heart ticking better. And I'm living alone, so big mistake. We make big mistakes. God will take care of us. He's still in control. There's a reason for it, because I can stand here and tell you, don't do it. Don't take these artificial hormones. They aren't going to help you. They can hurt you. The only indication at this point for hormone replacement therapy is basically hot flashes. So it's a tough call for some women, I know. Women is a little bit different from men. You know how the men find out what we're like? We're an emotional roller coaster. Woo-hoo. We get excited and we get cry and we do all kinds of things and we get mad. We're not as gentle as we should be at times. You know how a man finds out what we're really like is they get prostate cancer. And what do? They give them female hormones. They take out their testicles. And what do you know? The men become just like we are. Very, very sensitive. Very, very female. They start saying, oh, is that how you all act and feel? Yeah, so the endocrine glands have a lot to do with how we do things with our brain. So it's kind of interesting now as we go through pregnancy, we have all these endocrine changes, particularly thyroid is very obvious, and you speed up the metabolism. But guess what happens when we hit menopause? Boop, boop, it reverses. Now we become low in our thyroid. And things start happening. And actually our timing is reset once we've gone into menopause. And our glands tend to put out a different kind of output. We're winding down. It feels pretty good. We're not too bad. Somebody telling me something? But we're trying to, we can't rebalance or replace those hormones very well yet. How small we are and how little we know, we are still trying. And I always think of my professor. I don't know a thing about how the thyroid works, more or less the rest of the glands. You know how different we are? Stand like this. We're different. Our bones are different. Even the way we carry our arms. This is called the carrying angle, so we can carry the baby. We carry different than the man does. You ever seen a man pick up a baby? We carry the babies. We have a carrying angle. Our bones are so different from men. We're very, very light. We are the weaker vessel. Our bones are not as strong as a man. We also have less blood. We carry 20% less red cells than a man. We have a lot more water in our, you drink your water. You know, you get dehydrated. You won't beat us with water. Because our system needs a lot of water. 80% water, 75% water. How many of you can feel your tongue right now? Don't you wish? Terrible water. Drink better water than that. But anyway, we know the brain, we're going to have to slow down. I got to give the ending.
Okay.
Anyway, just...
We're ending.
I hate to interrupt, but we've got an 11 o'clock.
Okay, real quick. I got to do this one. All right. Knowing we're different and we're supposed to be the right-sided brain person where we're nurturing and peaceable and gentle, just remember we are spiritual equals. And I want you to show us, real quick, I got to show you a spiritual equal. Woo-hoo. There's our bones. They're different. There they are. That's my son who just called me to say, how you doing, Mom? They are spiritual equals. We are spiritual equals, and that's what's important. We are just like God. Our sameness in being created is that we're created in God's image. We have spiritual characteristics. With each of us having a soul, we're neither male nor female. You're all one in Jesus Christ. In the book, I want you to read the prayer, if you can. Do I have time for the quick prayer? Tell me I do. Tell me I do. Real quick, just bow your heads. Goodbye, Maxie. Thank you, God, for this body, for the things it can feel, for the things it can sense, for the wondrous things it can do, for its bright vigor at the day's beginning, for the hard, sweet satisfaction of walking, playing, working, for its very weariness at the day's end, and the dear comfort of its sleeping, sometimes, for even its pain, if it only to sting me back into some new awareness of our own existence upon this earth. I look upon it sometimes in reverent amazement, for we are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. All its silent, secret machinery, meshing and churning and muscles coordinating, the whole of it working so neatly. Lord, don't let me hurt it, scar it, and spoil it, overindulge it, or overdrive it. But don't let me coddle it either. Let me love my body enough to keep it agile and able and well, strong and clean. Thank you that I live within this body, the real, eternal, forever existing me, that it has been made to serve me so happily, so well, so long. And until the day comes when I have no further need of it, let me appreciate it to the very fullest and be grateful for it, my body. Thank you, Lord. Amen. And God said that everything he made was good, right?